Welcome to the College Planning Seminar on Choosing a College. I'm your host, Brennan Barnard, and joining me tonight is my friend and colleague, Tim Pratt, who is the Dean of College Advising at St. Paul's School, just down the road in Concord, New Hampshire. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks for having me, Brennan. Great to be here.
Tim is also has the unfortunate reality of being the college counselor to both of my children and having to deal with a real pain in the you-know-what for parent. He helped my son find a college and is in the process of helping my daughter. So I'm grateful for all kinds of things, and I'm going to play nice tonight. So Tim, I want to run a metaphor I've been thinking about with you and by you, and that's kind of college admission as this awkward dance, right? So and bear with me here. So it's kind of this power dance, right? So it goes the shifting power of choice, right? At the beginning, students are leading, they choose which colleges they apply to. Then the power shifts to the colleges and they get to decide who they admit. And now the power is back with the students and they get to lead, right? And hopefully in a less awkward way than me when I dance, because I have two left feet. And it doesn't end well. So, we're here tonight to kind of talk about choosing a college and how do they go about doing that? How do the parents who are joining us go about that and supporting their child? And how do we as counselors do it? So we are going to be using the chat function on your Zoom display. So those of you who are joining us, please go in there now and let us know if you're a student or a parent or a counselor. If you're a parent or student, what grade level, and all those things. So so we know who's in the room. And so we are also going to be using the Q&A, and please go in and enter your questions for Tim in the Q&A, and we'll get to that as we go along here. We will be talking across this half an hour about many aspects of the college search, and for our fellow counselors are here and parents and students. So I want to start, Tim, with kind of the financial realities of choosing a college. And can you give some just thoughts on how you advise students and parents, families around kind of considering costs when they're choosing a college?
Sure. And, hopefully that's been a conversation for quite a while. I mean, it's one of the very first questions we ask students is, is financial aid going to be a consideration? Is cost a consideration? And if it is, or if they don't know, we're leading with that in the search process, as I know you do too, Brennan. And I think that can be a very difficult conversation if it's just being sort of, begun now. But I think it's really important that parents are honest with their kids too about the financial parameters of what a family can afford. And also, I've seen certainly lots of kids who are really eager to go somewhere and they think, I know, I'll just borrow a lot of money and make it work. And they haven't really done the math on what that looks like. And so, certainly financing college, there are lots of ways to do it. But I think it's really important to be honest as a family in that conversation about what you can afford, and also to really map out what the implication of taking on an inordinate amount of debt is going to be for after college too. Certainly some debt is healthy and reasonable and can help make a college affordable, but it's important not to rely too much on that, or you can really hamstring yourself for what comes after.
Yeah, and I think it's a real teaching moment too, right? I mean, so kind of a chance for parents, for families to really kind of open up the books and talk honestly about, like, okay, you're now out of college, you have a job, and you're making, let's say, $50,000, right? And kind of laying out all the expenses and having parents do that. Like, this is what we pay in a mortgage. This is what we pay for a car. This is what we pay for your education, right? And having those conversations so they can really see, okay, this and then college debt of this amount per month can be crushing. So making those decisions and having those conversations is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There was a question that came in the pre-registration about ROI, return on investment, and the value of college. There's kind of an increasing focus and conversation about that kind of nationwide. How has that changed, if at all, the conversations you're having with families over time, or you hear colleagues in other schools having with families?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen for quite some time now that the question of value, the question of sort of affordability as it relates to value is catching up with prestige with some of our families, and it's healthy, right? When they look and say, okay, sometimes Home State U and the Honors College at Home State U is a really great value and a really great opportunity. And I think especially when you factor in grad school and, planning down the road for that too. And I mean, I can think of several students I've worked with who, knew they wanted to go to grad school and have, turned down maybe more prestigious places for places that are more affordable, knowing that that's going to help them, in the long run. So I think that's, more of a consideration. Where I think it's tricky is the notion that ROI really means that there are some programs and some majors that are, more desirable because of the value, and I'm a product of a liberal arts education. I really believe in the liberal arts, and I think that some students and some families can too quickly look past that value that may not be as measurable right away, but that really does prepare you. And that old great quote, right, that it trains you for nothing. A liberal arts education trains you for nothing and prepares you for everything. So right. I would encourage students and families not to focus in the ROI conversation too much on just, financial return on investment, but really the value of the education and the experience and the way that, it's going to help you grow as a person too.
Yeah. And the connections you'll make and everything, the whole package. I mean,
yeah.
There's a huge question around kind of the value of a bachelor's degree. And Jeff Salingo, the writer and also the head of the Burning Glass Institute, just wrote a white paper on the value of college, which was really intriguing, and it still has value. So our jobs are safe, I guess.
Yeah.
But important conversations for folks to have, and there is increasing amount of data around return on investment and around kind of outcomes from pay scale and from the third way and from degree choices and a bunch of different places. We'll put a document in the chat later that has a bunch of different resources around choosing a college. And one of those is a kind of investigating ROI. And another is kind of it's a spreadsheet to look at financial factors, right? To be able to compare schools based on the costs and the financial aid package and everything that you're getting. So we'll put that
Brennan,
in the, yeah.
All right. I don't know if it's in that document, but the other, research that I would point folks towards is the Gallup Purdue research on, long-term value of a college education and the impact of engagement. Because I think that's a really important lens for folks to look at this college choice through is, where am I or where is my child most likely to be able to really be engaged? Because that research, absolutely points towards that, and research opportunities and connecting with a professor or a mentor. And we've both seen that firsthand, certainly with our own kids, right? The value of that in terms of, being able to really make the most of that very significant investment.
Well, and our mutual friend, Mark Hatch at Colorado College, who's the VP there, he has talked a lot about high impact practices, right? And there's these, I think 12 high impact practices that that colleges and university researchers have identified. And as students think about which college they will attend, I think those are really good things to hone in on. One is just a few of them that jump off. One is study abroad experiences. One is internship experiences, a first year seminar course. There are a number of different ones, and we can provide that for folks. But it's these in Colorado College has done a lot of research into this and has tried to really infuse it integrate it into their curriculum. But I think as students consider maybe two options they have for college admission, to where to enroll, those kinds of things are important to hone in on. How about some other tips? And I'll just invite folks again, if you have questions for us, please put them in the Q&A. But Tim, so now a student comes into your office, right? And they've gotten into 2 colleges, 3 colleges, 4 colleges, maybe more. They've narrowed it down to maybe 2 or 3, right? And let's stay with the small liberal arts piece, for example, because you said you went to a small liberal arts college. And how do you help them kind of unpack those choices and compare them and make decisions?
Sure. I think the first thing is to congratulate them on having great choices and to remind them that it's not a right or wrong choice. It's a right or right choice in almost every scenario. And actually, if it is a right or wrong scenario, it's usually an easier conversation or an easier decision to make. But it's a little like it's a tired analogy and a simple one, but you go to a restaurant and there are 2 things on the menu you're dying to have, and you can only have one of them. Sometimes it's that kind of a choice, right? So I think if it's a matter of 2 very similar schools, 2 very similar choices, I think revisiting, if possible, is really of great value. I think you get a sense for where your people are, of whether sort of the culture of the school and of the student body is one where you feel like you would fit in. I do believe there's still a place for the gut feeling about that. I know that was important to me a long time ago, but
stepping on the campus and just feeling what it feels like, right?
I could see myself here, so I also try really hard not to impose my own personal opinions, but really to ask questions, and that's something I'd encourage parents to do too. I've had 3 kids go through the process myself, and I think sometimes I know this was the case for me, that sometimes our assumptions about what we think our kids will want and what they will like are very different than what they actually do. And so I try to ask questions. What are the things that are important to you as you think about this? Try to help them in terms of how to get beyond just the superficial impressions of places to, you mentioned first year seminars, to the residential experience. What are the co-curricular offerings or opportunities that that are there for you? So I think helping students to think about what the right questions to ask are as they're considering that, and then again, just to remind them, like, you can't go wrong, right? You're gonna have 2 great choices, and that's obviously if the financial piece isn't a part of that too, right? And if the financial piece is, then absolutely that becomes a part of the conversation too.
Right, but everything else being even in terms of finances and things like that. I mean, it feels like a huge decision, right? It feels like this, for some students, it's the biggest decision they've made yet in their lives.
Absolutely.
And so I think as much as we can help, kind of, we as parents and counselors can help diffuse some of that, like that feeling that there's this one linear path, and that once they start down that path, they've chosen their life, right? Like this is not life or death. And so I think as much as we can put that in perspective without minimizing how they're feeling, because it does feel huge.
Yeah. And I try to remind them too that, I mean, it absolutely matters. Like where you go to college does matter, but it mostly matters in ways that you can't predict, right? Because the way that your experience is going to unfold, you can't see yet. And, it's going to be a professor that you haven't met, who you have a class with your first year, who lights a spark. I know I ended up choosing a major based on, not the intent that I had going in, but a class that I loved my first year, and that I said I want to take more classes with this professor. And next thing you know, I was a political science major, and I think that happens a lot, certainly, especially in the liberal arts realm. But there are those experiences that you just can't see on a revisit. You can't see in a view book. You can't even always tell from talking with friends or former schoolmates who have gone to the school, because they may or may not be sort of have the same priorities as you. Yeah. So recognizing that the experience is going to unfold, and what you bring to it and the way you engage with it, whether it's at school X or school Y, is going to be what makes that experience for you.
Now, you said you don't impose your opinion as a counselor. Should I be suspect that my son ended up at your alma mater? He applied early decision.
He was a really smart kid. I'll just leave it at that.
I think the question for some parents is how much to be involved, right? Like how much should they weigh in? How much should they just step back and say it's your decision? Any thoughts on helping parents kind of navigate that tension?
It's hard. It's really hard. And again, I laugh as I think back of my own experience as a college counselor with, helping my kids, actually not, in most cases, not helping my kids through the process. I was, Brennan, you know the story, but, my oldest once reminded me that I was not his college counselor. And it was a great moment for me just to remember to sort of take a step back. But I think at this point, when there's a month until you have to make a decision, it's certainly important to have the conversation about, hey, what are you thinking? How can I help? Are there questions you have that you want to run by me? Are there ways I can make sure you can access the information you need to make this decision? But I still think it's really important to remember that it's their decision. It's going to be their 4 years, and as parents, to make sure that they know that.
Right, and it is hard. I mean, it is hard. I mean, it's hard to step back and let them drive the car, right? I still jam on the brakes in the passenger seat while my son is driving. Right. And so it's hard not to show our cards, because our children know how to read us. Right. Mm-hmm. They have spent 17 years learning our tells. Right. And so I think as much as we can manage our own anxiety, our own impressions, and our own desires is really important. And I think also just having an honest conversation with students as the decisions come back and say, what do you want? What do you want my role to be here? Mm-hmm. Right? Do you want my opinion? Do you want me just to let you make your choice and then celebrate that with you? Ask them where they are with it, because they'll tell us if we ask, or most of them will. And so I think it's really important to have those honest conversations, and not impose too much of our own desires. I guess I'll say again is really huge. There's a lot of parents and some counselors in the chat here, and so I'll just ask folks to maybe put in the chat, just kind of weigh in on what you see as the biggest pain point right now for you as your child or your student, your counselee looks at their different choices. So just sharing the chat, if you will, and we'll take another question. And Tim, this question came in through the registration too. What is your answer to a student who says, I don't like my choices anymore? So they're into a couple of schools and now they don't like their choices. Where do you go with that one?
That's usually a little bit of a longer session because I think there's a lot to dig into there. I think, I want to know sort of what's changed in your thinking. Sometimes, my experience is that sometimes that's actually just about the disappointment that they might be feeling in the moment about the places that they didn't get into. And I try to leave space for students to grieve for that, and then to help them to move on and to focus on the choices that they do have. If we've done a good job in helping them to construct a good list of places that do match them well, then I think usually when that comment comes, it's not based in it is more based in sort of the emotion of the experience of going through rejection from other places than what they're actually feeling. But if they really have changed and it's like, wow, I've taken, some of our engineering courses at St. Paul's this year, and all of a sudden now I think I want to go to engineering school, then that's a really different conversation about, what the path might be if they want to change course to that regard. But I think usually it's rooted in the emotion of March.
Yeah. There's a question that came in here through the Q&A. What do you think about choosing an experience versus a better education? We're from Illinois, and my son wants a mountain to climb. Deciding between CU Boulder and University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, engineering, computer science engineering for both. I want him to be happy. And I'll take this opportunity while you're thinking of an answer to put a plug in that our next college seminar is actually going to be with the Dean of Admission at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, Andy Borst, who's going to be talking with younger students, if you have a younger student, about course selection for next year. So, but what do you think about that kind of that experience versus a better education, like mountains to climb versus engineering?
Right, and I think that experience or that comparison is different than when usually this question comes to me. Sort of, Illinois, obviously the engineering program there is fantastic. Boulder has a great engineering program too. They're both, big public universities. Actually, the curriculum that students are going to pursue if they're studying computer science or engineering is going to be very similar at both. I find where that question usually comes is, a student who has, and again, my population, very high achieving, coming from all over the country and all over the world. And sometimes they have presumptions about certain places not being as academically oriented as others. And I really have to remind them that from the academic perspective, that most students in this country go to school where it's most affordable and close to home. And so there are, very, very bright kids at great schools and great public schools all over this country. And they're not, actually our economy, if it really did rely on, say, 20 schools to generate the best thinking in this country, our economy would be a disaster, right? And so that's where usually I have to disabuse them of the notion that if you're not going to a place that's ranked in the top 25, then you're not going to get a good education. And so the experience piece, I think, in that comparison of, say, Boulder to Illinois, I think the education actually is probably not going to be necessarily terribly different. And, to trust the student in terms of where they're going to feel like they're having the full experience.
Right. And then there always becomes the issue of, could it be a distraction, right? if the mountains are going to be calling constantly and being distracting, you have to know yourself and know your child and know whether that's going to be a positive or negative. So let's take maybe one or two more questions. And Timothy says, the tough thing right now is our daughter's choosing between two radically different schools. One, a state school where she would probably have fun social life versus a smaller private school that is super academically prestigious, but maybe she wouldn't have as much of a vibrant social life. Ironically, as parents, we're trying to steer her towards the fun place where she wants to go to the hyper competitive place. You know, you and I talked about this a little the other day when we were chatting about kind of, okay, so you're not comparing kind of apples to apples of a, you know, small liberal arts school to a small liberal arts school, or big state school to big state school, or whatever it is. You're looking at two very different places. How do you advise students?
I think part of that is what kind of a student, what kind of a personality does your child have? Are they somebody who's going to really reach out, be proactive about connecting with people, connecting with professors, or are they going to, you know, need a place where, you know, people are going to really know who they are, and you know, and that opportunity to connect is more built in, because I think that's the advantage of a smaller place, is that it's harder to get lost. You know, as again, back to the academic question, I think we sometimes neglect the fact that the professors at maybe less prestigious places are often coming from, you know, some incredible backgrounds, right? And the story I love to tell is that one of the most impressive and brightest students that I worked with at St. Paul's, she went to Williams undergrad. She was a classicist. She got her PhD at Oxford. She's now a classics professor. Now she's at Emory, but she was at Florida State before that. And I remember thinking, wow, you know, a kid who goes to Florida, you don't think of going to study the classics at Florida State, but if you did, you'd have an opportunity, you know, to have Celia Campbell as your professor, and wow, right? And I think those hidden gems are there. So, you know, I again, from the academic or intellectual side, I don't necessarily think that, you know, the more prestigious place is going to be, you know, one that provides a better education. But certainly the focus on undergrads, the focus on, you know, your child, you know, will be very different depending on the environment that he or she's in.
Yeah, and it comes back to the old kind of where you go is not who you'll be, right? Frank Bruni's book of,
Right.
It's going to matter what you put into it in terms of what you get out of it. And like you said, my older brother, who is also went to your alma mater, is then went and got his PhD in biology at Vanderbilt, and did research for a while and taught at a bunch of different places. He's now teaching at a very regional, large public school in university in Massachusetts, and you know, people might not see that as prestigious, but he is also has really great experience and connects with students. And so, you know, like you said, it's not the zero-sum game of okay, this is what I'm going to get for sure at this place versus this place. We really encourage people to dig in.
Another thing I think it's really important for parents to remember and to remind their kids of is that you're going to change a lot over the next 4 years. I think for any of us, if we think of, when I started college at 18, I was a very different person than when I graduated at 22. And, you know, that change is exciting, and it's going to happen, and it's going to happen differently, you know, at different places. But, you know, what you remember Mark Moody's great piece about the myth of fit many years ago, where he described sort of the ill-fitting jeans that, you know, at 45, you put the jeans on that you wore in college and they don't quite fit. And you know, things change, and fit evolves too, and leaving room for that so that, you know, you have a place where you feel like you can grow and grow into the place.
What a way to end. And I'll just say that when you and I met 20 years ago, we both had hairlines that were much different. Thanks,
Something changed that we wish didn't, for sure.
well, Tim, thanks so much for all you do and for being here with us tonight and sharing your thoughts, and thank you to everyone who attended. Like I said, and it's been in the chat here, that April 19th we'll be back with Andy Boris to talk about course selection for high school juniors, but also for younger students. So if you have a younger student, or you have friends with younger students, or you are a younger student, feel free to tune in. And finally, we would love your thoughts on tonight's episode. So if you fill out the survey that comes after this, you will have an opportunity to win a $50 Amazon gift card. And thanks again for attending, and have a great night.